Hi everybody, it's Doc Horowitz inviting you to uncover the mysteries of our next module on relationship management, which happens to be the fourth and final phase of our emotional intelligence work, in which we are striving to improve our ability to improve our interpersonal communication as well as our personal relationships and professional relationships in the workplace. As your text defines emotional intelligence in this phase, this is the place where, quote, the honeymoon is over. And what your authors mean by that is you've explored your own self-awareness, coming to know who you are, what triggers emotional issues within you, how you respond to them, in other words, your self-management, and also your ability to become aware of others, what motivates them, what presses their buttons, what are their emotional triggers, and so on. So one would assume that the final phase, relationship management, is kind of a culmination of those three areas and how you now go about the day-to-day or routine interactions with other people. Now I want to emphasize something before we go much further. This kind of application of our emotional intelligence on our ability to analyze how we feel about situations as we encounter them really is more something that you reserve for issues that are critically important to you. So for example, if you're discussing with a friend on a given day, where would you like to have lunch? I don't know that you need to go through the in-depth, sophisticated analysis of how do I feel about that? Are any emotions being triggered? How does the other person feel about that? How should I respond to how the other person feels about that, and so forth. So that's kind of like my caveat about all of the work that we do in communication, which is you save it for when it matters, when there are issues of great importance, both in the workplace and your personal lives. When there's a lot on the line, when the stakes are high, that's when we pull out this knowledge, these strategies, and we put them to work. So that having been said, let's talk a little bit more about this fourth and final phase of emotional intelligence, relationship management. As your author stated so eloquently in the text, this is where the honeymoon is over. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. When we are engaged in self-awareness and self-management and even social awareness, we're mostly putting our best foot forward, where ideally, if you will, thinking about our own emotions, our own awareness, perhaps our cultural programming, our value systems, and how we typically respond and whether or not they've been effective for us. And perhaps something new might be more about social awareness, where we actually consciously step out of ourselves, our cultural programming, and into the world of others. And that takes a lot more finesse, a lot more evaluation, and a lot more sophistication, if you will. However, the term the honeymoon is over comes to mean that at some point in your relationships, be it at work or in your personal lives, you are going to encounter difficulty with other people, and that's just inevitable. And it may be relatively minor, it may be more serious, it may even be relationship threatening, may be very conflictual. When those situations arise, your knowledge and your ability to implement strategies connected to relationship management are going to make the difference as to whether or not you are not only an effective communicator, but whether or not you can maintain a positive relationship and not damage your relationship due to a lack of understanding or skill in navigating through this inevitable conflict. Now, it just so happens in our module I supply you with a combination of very powerful skills. However, the first of which is your own development in the first 3 phases of emotional intelligence. Because you now possess insight into yourself, insight into how you respond to difficult situations, social awareness about others, and you've had a chance to practice many of these strategies for enhancing those skills and abilities, you have an advantage over others when things go wrong, so to speak. You're able to step back, think about your feelings, pull out a strategy for allowing you to do that. Think about how you want to respond to this conflict if it's at that stage. Think about the other person and how they're likely to hear your response or how they feel about this issue. And that's powerful ammunition. However, there's 2 more specific skills you'll encounter in this module, one of which you've already had an opening with, an exposure to, called active listening. But the key skill you'll also investigate will be what I call delivering, quote, bad news to another person. How to communicate difficult messages that are inevitable when you're dealing with a conflict or sensitive issues, be it in a workplace, be it with a friend, a loved one. And so you're going to be exposed to some rules of the road in step-by-step navigating and planning about how to interact with an individual when in fact you need to deliver some message that is going to be uncomfortable for you as well as the other receiver. So this is not easy work, but the rules of the road for communicating that news will help you to avoid many of the pitfalls, and particularly not to have that other individual become defensive and shut down the communication, so to speak. And as I've mentioned earlier, you will encounter these situations. They're not easy for anyone. They involve criticism or perceived criticism, and at best, it's difficult work. So that strategy of communicating, quote, bad news, along with your previous learned skill about active listening, are the perfect combination that will allow you to interact in a positive way, and most importantly, at the end of the day, when you have finished with this difficult communication, you will have maintained a positive relationship. This is the ultimate goal in relationship management. It's easy to damage a relationship. If you react because someone upsets you and you say something you can't take back, this can have damaging impact, and sometimes in a permanent way. So with that, we have a couple of very, very important tools to acquire, and I invite you now to review the rest of our modules, where of course I have demonstrations that will help you to execute a very positive communication that we call relationship management.